Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a topic that really touches everyone, but often stays hidden in the shadows: financial censorship. It's this, well, incredibly powerful tool, often unseen, that can influence everything, right? From how you earn money to even expressing your opinion. So, what is this silent weapon the state sometimes wields? And maybe more importantly, why should you care about it? Let's get into it.
Absolutely. When you say financial censorship, people often think, oh, that's something for like really strict authoritarian countries far away.
Right, not here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the truth is, it's much more subtle and it's everywhere. It's like an invisible barrier. It can stop you from using your money, basically cutting you off from, well, from participating in society. And it's deeply tied to how governments control their money, their currency, and their financial systems. It really does affect people all over the globe.
Okay, so let's nail down a definition. Financial censorship it's when your bank account gets blocked, right? Or maybe heavy restrictions are put on what you can do with your money.
Yeah, and often for reasons that are political, or sometimes, honestly, they seem totally arbitrary.
And we're not just talking about people convicted of serious crimes here.
No, not at all. This can hit anyone.
Mhm.
NGOs, journalists trying to publish something sensitive, activists fighting for a cause, even just regular folks who haven't done anything wrong. Think about platforms like PayPal or Patreon, even your normal high street bank. They have the power, technically, to just shut down your account.
Wow. Often without much explanation, too.
Sometimes with very little, yeah. Leaves you completely stuck. And look, this isn't just a personal hassle. It actually slows down the whole economy. It stifles commerce. If money can't move freely, ideas and businesses can't either. It hinders that kind of spontaneous growth you get in a free market.
So how does this system actually operate? How do they do it?
Well, it's interesting because the traditional banking system has, in many ways, kind of become like an appendage of the state.
An appendage, like an arm or a leg.
Sort of, yeah. A lot of this control gets formalized through these big international agreements, like the ones from J5, that's the Financial Action Task Force. It sets global standards, supposedly against money laundering and terrorism financing. And on the surface, you have rules like KYC, Know Your Customer, and AML, Anti-Money Laundering. They sound good, right? Presented as vital for stopping crime.
Yeah, stopping drug lords or terrorists. That makes sense.
It does, and they probably do catch some of that. But what we've seen happen over time is that these tools, they've been gradually turned into ways to watch and control ordinary people.
Ah, so it's gone beyond just fighting major crime. It's become more about general surveillance.
That's exactly it. And this whole setup, it flips justice completely upside down. Think about it. Usually you're innocent until proven guilty, right? That's the foundation.
Supposedly, yeah.
But in this financial world, you're almost forced to prove you're not doing anything wrong. You're kind of always under suspicion, having to justify yourself, even without a specific charge. The real aim, arguably, isn't just stopping those big crimes anymore. It's about controlling the population, stopping people using their own money how they want. It creates this climate where you feel like nothing's allowed unless someone explicitly says it is. You kind of live with this low-level fear. And sometimes they even seem to target people almost randomly, just to make an example, to remind everyone who's in charge. You don't even have to break a law, just annoy the wrong person in power.
That's a pretty chilling thought. To really get a handle on this, maybe we should look at some real cases.
Definitely. Examples make it much clearer.
Many people will remember the Canadian truckers' protest a while back. It started as a protest, but then the financial side kicked in hard. Their GoFundMe got shut down.
Right, that was the first step.
And then their bank accounts got frozen. But it wasn't just the leaders, was it?
No, that was the shocking part. It spread to people who donated maybe just $20.
Yeah.
Even suppliers, like the guy selling them fuel. If you were associated, boom, frozen out.
Just by association. Wow.
And the implications of that, especially in a country like Canada, which is seen as a solid democracy,
Well,
they're huge. There was even talk, serious talk in the government about redefining terrorist to include basically anyone who questioned the official government line.
seriously.
Seriously, it shows this mindset where instead of dealing with public anger or disagreement, the instinct is just to punish financially, shut them down rather than listen, like saying you'll take what we give you instead of actually engaging.
And it goes beyond protests, too, right? I remember the situation with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks.
Oh, absolutely. Their official donation channels, bank accounts, PayPal, all shut down. Why? For publishing information the governments didn't want out. That forced them, way back then, to start accepting Bitcoin because it was one of the few ways people could still support them directly. Imagine that a journalistic outlet financially cut off.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier how information gets held onto and used later.
Yes, that's another key tactic. Look at the case of Roger Ver. Years, literally years, after he gave up his U.S. citizenship, they went after him. They claimed he hadn't declared the full value of his Bitcoin back when he left. But at that time, Bitcoin barely had a clear legal value.
Right, it was still very early days.
Exactly. And the amount they were talking about, it was tiny in the grand scheme, like equivalent to what the U.S. government spends in maybe 10 seconds. It clearly wasn't about the money itself. They held on to that information and used it when it suited them politically. It was about making an example, showing they can reach you years later, control again.
And this isn't even a new idea, is it? This financial control tactic? History has some dark precedents.
It really does.
Yeah.
You look back at something like Nazi Germany, the confiscation of assets from Jewish people. It didn't start with gas chambers. It started with financial restrictions, limiting businesses, forcing them to declare assets, then just taking them. It was a gradual stripping away of their ability to function, to escape, to resist. The method isn't new, but technology makes it so much more efficient, so much harder to sidestep today.
That's a sobering comparison.
It is. But it highlights a consistent theme.
Sure.
The state, if you let it, will always put itself first, above the individual. And taking away your money, your capital, is just a classic way to take away your options, your independence. Your money represents your freedom, in a way. Freedom to move, to support yourself, to fight back. When they take that, they take your power. The game hasn't changed, just the tools.
Okay, this is all sounding quite bleak. It paints a picture of a system that can be easily turned against individuals. So the big question is, what's the alternative? How do you actually protect yourself against this silent weapon, especially now? You mentioned needing a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
Exactly. And that brings us to something like Bitcoin Cash, BCH. It's designed specifically to function as that peer-to-peer electronic cash, and it offers some powerful resistance to censorship.
How so? What makes it different?
Well, several key things. First, it's digital, it's intangible, you can't physically seize it like, say, gold. Roosevelt did that in 1933, but forced people to sell their gold to the government at a loss. With BCH, you could theoretically hold vast wealth just by remembering the seed phrase, a few words.
In your head.
In your head. Second, and this is crucial, it's decentralized. Massively so. There's no central company headquarters to raid, no server farm to shut down. Think about older digital money attempts, like gold money or Liberty Dollar. They were centralized, and boom, government shut them down fast. BCH doesn't have that single point of failure. It makes large-scale confiscation incredibly difficult for the state.
So no single throat to choke, basically.
Precisely. And related to that, no intermediaries. With Bitcoin Cash, there's no bank involved. There's no account that someone can just decide to close. There's no third party you need to trust or the authorities can lean on.
So it's direct, person to person.
Exactly. And critically, it's permissionless. Nobody needs to give you approval to use it. You don't ask permission to open an account or to send money or receive it. If you control your own keys in your own wallet, you are your own bank. You own your funds, period. It really captures that original Satoshi Nakamoto vision of electronic cash for the world, low fees, fast transactions, usable for everyday stuff, without needing weird layers that might add back complexity or control.
Okay, that makes sense. But, people hear crypto and think of different things. A question I imagine listeners might have is, okay, but why not Bitcoin's Lightning Network? Isn't that crypto too?
That's a really important question. And the differences matter a lot here. Lightning Network tries to solve Bitcoin's scaling problems. But, kind of ironically, it brings back some of the very issues Bitcoin was meant to fix. It works using these payment channels. Think of them like private tunnels off the main road. But these channels often rely on big, centralized hubs or nodes.
Hubs, like intermediaries again.
In effect, yes. If one of these big hubs decides to close its channel with you, or if it goes offline, or if authorities pressure it, your funds can get stuck, or it can become expensive and slow to get them back onto the main Bitcoin chain. You're trusting these nodes again. So that really weakens the censorship resistance. It reintroduces points of control and potential failure. The original Bitcoin design, which BCH follows, is built to be censorship resistant right on its base layer. The real attacks we've seen haven't been technical hacks. They've been like social engineering trying to change the story, add limitations, convince people it can't scale on its own.
Social engineering. That's interesting. Okay, another common route people take. What about using those big crypto exchanges or crypto banks? Like Binance or Coinbase. They handle crypto, right?
Right, they do handle crypto. But using them for censorship resistance, that's kind of missing a point. Think about it. You're essentially putting a big target on your forehead.
How so?
Because these companies are centralized businesses. They have offices, they have CEOs, they have bank accounts. They are, as I sometimes say, hostage to compliance.
Mm-hmm.
They had to follow regulations. They collect all your KYC information, name, address, ID, everything, just like a regular bank. So when the government comes knocking, what are they going to do? They'll comply. They'll freeze accounts, hand over your data, enforce restrictions. They become an extension of the state's control system, just using crypto rails. They might be convenient for trading, sure, but if your goal is to escape financial censorship, relying on them just puts you right back in a similar system.
Okay, so the case for truly decentralized, permissionless cash like Bitcoin Cash seems pretty strong, especially with those examples you gave. It feels urgent. So let's get really practical then. Say someone listening is thinking, okay, I see the threat. BCH sounds like a potential shield. What tools can they actually use? How do you make this work day to day?
Right, the practical side is key. The absolute first, most vital step, use a non-custodial wallet where you control the private keys and one that doesn't require KYC.
Non-custodial means you hold the keys, not some company.
Exactly. You are the bank. A good example is Celine Wallet. You download the app, it generates your keys, and that's it. No name, no ID number, no bank details needed. Maybe just your phone's passcode for security. It lets you interact directly with the Bitcoin Cash network. Full control, directly in your hands.
That's step one.
Okay, what else? For extra privacy, to make it harder to follow the money, you can use tools like Cash Fusion. It's built into some BCH wallets. It mixes your coins with other people's transactions in a clever way, making it really difficult to trace where funds came from or went. And basic internet hygiene helps too. Always consider using privacy tools like Tor or a reputable VPN when you're making transactions, especially sensitive ones. It helps mask your internet location and activity.
Makes sense. Any tools for, say, funding projects that might get censored?
Yeah, that's where something like Flipstarter comes in. It's basically a crowdfunding platform, but it runs directly on Bitcoin Cash, peer-to-peer funding. This means you can raise money for a cause, an activist group, maybe an independent journalist, whatever it is, without needing permission from GoFundMe or Patreon or anyone else who might shut you down. It directly supports resistance efforts.
Wow. Okay. So non-custodial wallets, privacy mixers like Cash Fusion, VPNs to Digger, and permissionless funding like Flipstarter. Those are concrete tools.
They are tools that leverage BCH's core strengths.
This has been really illuminating. It's clear financial censorship isn't some abstract concept. It's a real thing happening now, but also that there are ways to push back using knowledge and the right tools. And it's not about, hiding illegal activity, but protecting basic freedom and autonomy.
Exactly. And maybe a final thought for listeners to chew on. Really consider that tension, that constant push and pull between the state wanting control over money and just that basic human need for freedom, for autonomy. Think about it. If your bank account can be frozen at will, what does that do to your ability to defend yourself legally? Or to travel? Or even just to buy groceries? How free are you, really, if your access to your own money depends on staying in line? Financial freedom isn't just a niche topic. It underpins so many other liberties we take for granted.
A powerful point to end on. Thank you so much for breaking all that down. And thanks to all of you for joining us on this deep dive. We definitely encourage you to keep digging into these topics. Think about what financial freedom truly means in today's world. Stay curious, and we'll catch you next time.